Today we celebrate Kujichagulia Self-Determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. This day is an excellent occasion for a discussion on the topic of African American group self-identification, specifically regarding the use of the group label African American. For a few years now, there have been postings and repostings in social media of commentary from high-profile celebrities who vehemently reject the use of the term African American. The most visible objections have come from such as Smokey Robinson, Morgan Freeman, and Whoopi Goldberg. It goes without saying that these folks have a right to their opinions, and while I admire many of these artists for their great talent and gifts in their respective fields, their attitudes regarding the use of the term African American is unfortunately rooted in several false assumptions and misconceptions. Allow me to point out three major misconceptions regarding the use of the term African American. The first false assumption is that Black folks calling themselves African American is relatively new in our history in this country. In the history of Africans in America, that is, people of African descent born in America speaking English under the rule of the United States government, there have been several terms that have been used in the self-identification of African Americans, Black folks. African, Negro, colored, and Black. Now, when I ask students about which of these terms is the oldest, they always pick wrong. In fact, using the term African has a longer history among our people as a term for self-naming. We've used the term African or a variant of that, Afro-American, Africo-American, or African American. Between 1827 and 1899, African appeared in the titles of 36% of the periodicals published by and for Black people. Now, this is important because we're talking about the appearance of a term in reference to Black folks in America in English written publications in America. So dating back to the beginning of these, you will find that we've used the term African in reference to ourselves. Sometimes you may see the term African American or Afro or Africo American, which is an abbreviation of African American. We should be reminded that the oldest existing organization formed by African Americans is the African Methodist Episcopal Church, founded by Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. This church grew out of the organization referred to as the Free African Society. So we see even in the labeling of our organizational names, Africans in America use the term African most abundantly. Other such organizations were the African Educational Benevolent Society, Sons of African Society, the African Association for Mutual Relief, and the African Baptist Church. False assumption number two. Calling ourselves African American is an aberration that is inconsistent with the labeling of other Americans. You often hear people make the argument, or, well, not much of an argument, make the statement that white Americans do not use the term European American. Many people who are from the South who are not accustomed to the ethnic diversity among European Americans assume that white folks in America never use term European American or Italian American and so forth. Those of us who are from the North may, of course, be familiar with terms such as Italian American, Greek American, and so forth. And of course, people of Asian descent often use the term Asian American, Japanese American, Korean American, and in fact, many of the people who argue against the use of the term African American routinely use such terms. I grew up in Philadelphia, where there's a large segment of the community that is Italian. And when we refer to folks who are Italian, like say Sylvester Stallone or Rudolph Giuliani, Nancy Pelosi, and refer to them as Italian, it's generally understood that we're talking about Italian Americans. No one ever asked them, where were you born in Italy? False assumption number three. We Black, not African. There's nothing wrong with using the term black in reference to African people. However, there's a growing population of folks who say that being black is something opposite being African. These folks are unfamiliar with the history of using the term black in reference to ourselves. We need to understand our use of the term black in self-identification in the context of our history. We started using the term black proudly and boldly during the 1960s. This was a result of a consciousness movement to celebrate our identity. Very important to understand that we did not use the term black to separate ourselves from African identity. In fact, we use the term black to affirm our African identity. We should know that the black, not African concept is a new development emerging from the culture of the disinformation age. Finally, I should point out that the notion that African Americans are not culturally African is ill-informed. There are numerous African cultural survivals that continue to prevail. To recognize these, we need only study African American linguistic continuities, our music and dance, and our foodways. For information on the latter, I encourage you to check out the Netflix documentary series High on the Hog. If we are to be perfectly honest, the problem some of our people have with the term African American has everything to do with the disdain for Africa that began with the creation of the term Negro by Europeans. Kwanzaa was created to combat the anti-African attitude that persists in American society. Shaped by rhetoric and imagery that demeans rather than elevates African identity, we exist in a terrible space where there are too many black folks who are more insulted by being called African than being called the N-word, the N-word. That is why we celebrate and affirm the need and responsibility to define who we are based on cultural and historical awareness. This is why we celebrate Kujichagulia Self-Determination. This is why we celebrate Kwanzaa.